I would like to just spend a little time with you discussing wellness, and in particular, going over the major model in our profession. There are quite a number of models of wellness out there. We couldn't possibly cover all of them, but the indivisible self model of wellness is one of the top ones in our profession. So let's just spend a little time walking through it together. All right, so as you look at this model, first I want to say that Jane Myers and Tom Sweeney developed another model originally called the Wheel of Wellness. And then they did a decade of research on wellness and came up with this model based on their research. They did structural equation modeling, which, for those of you who don't know, is really higher order statistical analyses that helps develop factors around models and creates models. And so this one is a model that's based in a ton of research from thousands and thousands of participants. So anyway, you think about this and you look at this model and you see there's one large circle, which is the self. And then you see five blue circles. And those are groupings of different parts of the self. And you see those are creative, coping, physical, essential, and social selves. And within each of those, if you look, you also see what those groupings are made up of. So for example, the essential self, spirituality, gender identity, cultural identity, self-care, the creative self, the thinking, the emotions, work, your humor, positive humor. And I'd like to go through each of those with you just to break it down a little bit. But I would like to say, as we look at different pieces of the self, the model is called the indivisible self. So even though there are parts, they all make up the self, and they're all part of one big whole. The last thing as you look at this also are contexts in which we find ourselves, in which we live, in which we're either raised or where we currently are. And those contexts certainly influence the different groupings of the indivisible self, whether they're local, safety issues, whether they're institutional in terms of systems, educational systems, the government, industries, media. They could be even global events that certainly influence us. And then also thinking about this from a developmental perspective, in terms of our lifespan and kind of where we are developmentally influences these the self. So let's take a moment and really look at each of these pieces individually. Okay, so we're going to start by again emphasizing the indivisibility of ourselves, recognizing that we are indivisible when it comes to our wellness. Really helps give us a better understanding of the ways in which we can be more holistic in working with clients or in taking care of ourselves. I mean, we certainly are, we're certainly finite beings with finite resources. And, sometimes it's necessary for us to shift energies from one area to another so that we can focus on those parts of the self that need attention. So let's start by looking at the coping self. And as you might imagine, that refers to the ways that we regulate ourselves and respond to life events, as well as the ways that we work to overcome, potential negative effects of those events. And we look first to self-worth, and that's certainly a core issue for all of us, with varying levels of self-worth. And what self-worth is just accepting who and what we are, both the imperfections and the strengths that we have, our assets, if you will, and the level of which we value ourselves as unique individuals. The second part of the coping self is leisure, and it's an essential part. It's how we spend time outside of tasks and work. Are we satisfied with our free time activities? Do they meet our top values? And also, I think this is really important too for mental health, and that's having one activity where we really lose ourselves to the flow of it, where we are focused solely on what we're doing, and we're not thinking about all the other stuff that we have to do. And there are lots of examples of that, and I'm sure you can come up with some, but that you're able to engage in an activity where you really are just free of all the noise that we have on a day-to-day basis. Speaking of which, another part of the coping self is our stress management. I mean, we all have stress, and stress goes up and down in terms of levels and intensity and duration. So what is your perception of your ability to manage and regulate stress? Do you see change as an opportunity for growth, or do you see it as a threat to yourself? And it really calls for ongoing self-monitoring of your ability to cope, your resources in coping, or your coping skills, healthy or unhealthy. The last piece of the coping self are realistic beliefs. So for a lot of people, it's recognizing that perfection is not a thing. It's not a goal. Shouldn't be a goal. Recognizing that being liked or loved by everyone is also not a thing. And then also it requires courage to be imperfect, to be inadequate at times. And that does require courage to do that. So that's the coping self in a nutshell. So let's move on to the next piece. All right, so the creative self really refers to the ways that we create a unique place for ourselves in the world through our interactions, through understanding the world, and the sub factors of the creative self are thinking, being mentally active, staying active with your brain and the way that you think. Certainly reflection can do that. Being open-minded, curious, and even experimental are ways to engage our thinking self. And our general ability to learn, to know, to problem solve. Where are you with that in terms of your wellness? The second sub-factor of the creative self are emotions. What's your capacity to be aware of your feelings, to be able to even label them, to experience them, to allow yourself to experience feelings? What's your skill level in doing that? And then finally, there's being aware of them, experiencing them, and then also expressing them appropriately. Whether they're, feelings of what we would label positive or feelings of what we would label negative, can you express them appropriately? The third piece to the creative self is control. Really having a belief that you can achieve goals that you have for yourself, visions that you want to pursue, that you have some control in that, being able to assert yourself and really focus on your needs at times, and also having a sense of being able to influence events and paths in your life, that you are the author of your life story, and though you don't have complete control of everything, you have some influence in what happens to you and the path that you choose. Positive humor is the next sub factor, being able to laugh at yourself in positive ways, with some humility, obviously, but also sometimes being able to positively laugh at unexpected events that happen in life, and then using humor in positive ways to get through difficult times, appropriately, of course, but being able to use humor is a way to help alleviate stress. It also can help with alleviating control over things you don't have control over. So you see some correlation there. The last piece is work. Feeling satisfied with your work, whatever that is, whether it's vocational or avocational, meaning whether you're getting paid or not getting paid, what you have work, you do work. Are you satisfied with that? Also feeling like you're financially in an adequate place. You can have your needs met. And then feeling as though your skills are being used well, are what your gifts are being utilized, and are they valued in the work that you do? Again, vocationally or avocationally. And then ability to cope with stress in the workplace or in the work that you do. So that's the creative self, again, in a nutshell. Let's move on to the next one. So now we are looking at the essential self, which just refers to the aspects of the self that are essential in making meaning out of life, the processes that we navigate in life and within ourselves, and in relationship to others. And the sub factors are first, spirituality. I can talk a lot about this, but spirituality, in terms of this model, refers to your personal beliefs and the behaviors that you practice as part of a recognition that you are just a mind and a body. This doesn't have to include some sort of organized belief system or religion, but how do you practice on a daily basis things that really invoke your personal belief system? So that's how it's defined in this model. Gender identity. Are you satisfied with your gender identity? Are you satisfied with your gender expression? How you express yourself? Do you feel supported in your gender identity and in your gender expression? Do you feel supported by those around you? And are you able to transcend gender stereotypes, gender roles that don't seem to fit for you? Are you able to transcend those and positive, healthy ways. Um, Very similar things with cultural identity, your connection to your culture, and to others that share your culture. What's your satisfaction with that? Do you feel supported in your cultural identity by people in your circle? And what's your ability to connect and work with others from different backgrounds, from different cultures? How does that fit with you? Are you one who is eager and open for that, or are you closed off, guarded, defensive? That can tell us a little bit about where you are with your cultural identity development. And then the last piece of the essential self is self-care, and that you take responsibility for your wellness, which means are you engaging in self-care practices that are meaningful for you and beneficial for you? Do you have, safe habits? For instance, do you wear a seatbelt? Do you get checkups? Do you take care of yourself in those ways? And then also doing your best to minimize harm with prevention of unhealthy elements in your life, if possible. Do you engage in that as well? So that's the essential self. So next is the physical self, the biological, physiological processes that maintain our physical bodies and enable ongoing development and functioning. And there's a couple of sub-factors to that. Nutrition is one of them. Are you eating well? Are you conscious of what you're putting in your body and how what you eat influences your body? Do you have some understanding of, I would say a lot of the new science in terms of the gut-mind, gut-brain relationship? Are you also minimizing your unhealthy coping with food, which a lot of people do? Do you exercise? Do you engage in regular physical activity that's at a level appropriate for your body and your body type and your development? And then, we also know the physical self. It's important to maintain flexibility, particularly as we age. Flexibility and balance, those are important pieces to that. Those are, some. I would, we'd also add in that the physical self, the highly important piece of sleep. And we know from a lot of research that sleep affects everything. And we now even have research that says if you get enough sleep over a period of time, it can lengthen your life. So sleep is highly important. Hydration is also really important. Make sure our body is properly hydrated. And then if you have, chronic conditions, which many people do you manage them well? So that's the physical self. The last one is the social self. And that refers just to, the relationships we have, social support system we have through our connections with friends, family, intimate partners. Friendship and love are sometimes conceptualized as being on a continuum. That, friendships are over here, love is over here. But sometimes there's no clear delineation between the two. But research continues to support the idea that having at least one strong relationship is a significant predictor of positive mental health and physical health. So when you're evaluating your social self or evaluating your client's social self. Some things to consider are that, having friends or just people who you can trust, like really trust with yourself, and who are also able to provide emotional, material, and even knowledge-based support when needed is important. Our ability to be trusting and intimate with another person and share ourselves with them is also a factor that has been found to be super important. So not only do you trust, but can you also be trusted and be trusting? Is that a way of being for you? Are you a trusting person? And having a family-like support system is probably the last piece, whether that's family of origin or family of choice, or both, but one that's characterized by some shared values, beliefs, the ability to solve conflict respectfully, and communicate effectively. So that's the social self. So I hope this has been helpful, just to dig in a little bit to the indivisible self model. Again, this is a highly used model that is very evidence-based, in terms of being able to apply it to a multitude of cultures is an important piece to continually seek. I will say that the research that was conducted to build this model was done with participants from a wide range of cultures, identities, so it's fairly applicable, but as with anything, we want to continue to determine, is this appropriate for me, and also is this appropriate for this particular person that's sitting right in front of me. Hope it was helpful, and we'll see you next time.